Hello, everybody. Welcome back to PolySync's AI for Social Good webinar series. This is our last webinar, number 6 out of 6. Today, we'll be talking about AI and human creativity and how we can look at AI as a tool for enhancing rather than replacing. And really, we have some great speakers that are going to talk about human creativity and AI and how do we combine those things for greater impact. Before we dive into things, though, we have some opening remarks from two really important leaders of this initiative. We've got Cecilia Cannon, who's the managing director at PolySync, and Primo Amrain, who is AI National Skills Director at Microsoft Philanthropies for Switzerland. So I will hand over to Cecilia. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And a big thank you to everybody who has joined us across this series. We've fit a lot into a couple of months, and we're really grateful for all of the collaborating organizations that have really helped us co-design the sessions and bring depth and diversity to the conversations. So Co-Initiatives of Change, Globe Ethics, CALP Network, the Institute for Global Negotiation, the Lotus Flower, and IOM Research. Thank you for your collaboration and for sharing this with your networks and contributing speakers. We designed this series with one core belief, that nonprofits must have a voice and power in shaping the future of AI and must be empowered to integrate it into their work seamlessly and responsibly. So we've been able to unpack several challenges posed by AI to the nonprofit sector across the series, from governance challenges to ethics and misinformation, data privacy, etc. But we've also discussed solutions to those challenges. And we've really seen how various nonprofits and experts are integrating AI into their work in different ways. I would like to also extend deep gratitude to the PolySync team for their creativity, care, and hard work behind the scenes. Annabelle Malesavljevic, Sandra Uwantege-Hart, also for moderating the session, which has gone really well. Thank you, Sandra. Rebecca Bailey, Valentina Lazzarini, Naledi Holbrugger, and Hannah Kalichava. Thank you. It's really been seamless. And then also thank you to Microsoft Philanthropies, whose generous support has made this series possible and free for all of our attendees and for nonprofits and their networks around the world. So thank you again to Microsoft Philanthropies for really letting us design the webinar series based on insights gathered from nonprofits. So we hope this series has sparked new ideas, partnerships, and possibilities. The recordings and free resources will remain available for free to access on our website, on PolySync's website, and Sandra will share the details of that later. Please share them widely. We really hope that nonprofits around the world can make use of and benefit from these resources. And while today is the last of the 6-part series, we're not done yet. This is really just the beginning of the conversation, of trainings, etc. So if you want to be part of what's next, stay tuned about our exciting plans. We're working currently on looking at some certified training modules that can really help you integrate generative AI into different areas of your work, practically speaking, to really enhance your missions and the impact of your work. From fundraising to communications, monitoring and evaluation, ideation, and more. So stay tuned. And with that, I'm happy to introduce Primo Amrain, the Microsoft Philanthropies AI National Skills Director in Switzerland. And we're really happy to have you here with us today, Primo. And Primo is going to tell us a little bit about the AI Skills Initiative and what they have planned coming up. So thank you again, and over to you, Primo.
Thanks a lot, Cecilia. Thanks a lot to you, to PolySync, and everyone who was involved to make this webinar series happen. As you already mentioned, it's important to state that this is an initiative which was supported by Microsoft Philanthropies. And also my dear colleague Ashutosh, who speaks later, we are both not from the commercial side of Microsoft. And as you could tell, at least the ones who have been in the webinar so far, this was not about pushing Microsoft technology at all. So it's more about making people aware about what the AI transformative character brings, and especially also making sure that we take people along the journey. So as Microsoft is advancing on the technology side, and there's a lot of AI ongoing, a lot of AI transformative waves coming, we believe it's in our obligation to make sure that people are empowered with the right skills. because there is a danger in the end that you would have only a part of the society in the end enabled by AI. And we want to make sure that we reach broad societal masses as broad as possible. So this is an initiative that is not targeted towards like enterprise customers or partners. It's really about non-profit organizations. We talk to schools, we talk to civil society organizations, because again, we want to make sure that on a very broad scale, people are aware about AI, are aware about benefits, but also about some of the challenges, talking about ethical use, which was also covered in the webinars, or talking about critical thinking. So Microsoft Philanthropies is really here with the ambition to expand this opportunity to people around the world by empowering learners to build AI and digital skills. So sharing this AI skills at scale gives partners and organizations the tools to learn how to actually work better in like an AI-powered world in the future. And as a bottom line, the initiative is all about democratizing access to AI skills and empowering individuals in the end to be aware and hopefully also use this transformative technology for good. So the partnership with Polysig, very concretely, has been a very powerful example of this mission in action. So together we have brought inclusive and I believe also very globally relevant AI learning to non-profit leaders, to individuals and also change makers. So thank you everyone who joined on this journey. And in the end, it's not about the technology, it's really the people who make the difference. So your engagement, your interest is what turns the potential into action. So thanks a lot to everyone, and handing over to Sandra.
Thank you so much, Primo. That's actually perfect, that all of this really starts with human beings, right? And human beings are very unique in their creative capacities. So how do we start thinking about AI as something that enables rather than replaces? And of course, Cecilia gave a great shout out to all of our partners supporting this webinar series. We do want to acknowledge and thank them. It's not just a PolySync effort in this case. And of course, this whole time we've been compiling resources for the entire audience. So we do have this free AI resources page that will remain available to you. And please do scan the QR code, have a look. It includes anything from papers that are interesting all the way through to training, and it's just for you. So please do check that out. Quick housekeeping before we kick into the topic, really interesting topic. Q&A, we're only going to be using the Q&A function in Zoom, so just click on that little chat bubble with a question mark at the bottom of your screen if you have a question, and we will try to respond during the webinar, so even during presentations. However, we'll keep some of those questions, the interesting ones, until the end to discuss with the audience and where you guys can ask speakers specific questions. As Primo mentioned, we're really thinking about diversity and equity. So we have a demographic poll. It's totally voluntary, but please do fill it out because it allows us to report back on who is participating, in terms of reaching that broader vision of making sure that equitable access is what defines, this enabling aspect of AI. And if you need closed captions, there's a little CC thing at the bottom of your screen. Check there, but all of our webinar recordings do provide multilingual subtitles. So feel free to go back to the recording and listen in your own language or read the subtitles in your own language if needed. So back to the topic, right? How do we blend sort of human creativity and AI for greater impact? How do we blend the enabling effect of AI on our own work for greater impact too? And how do we counter this mistaken sometimes impression that AI is going to replace us? At the end of the day, this is a tool for us. So we're going to be exploring how nonprofits can be using AI to augment their work, increase knowledge across the organization, create more bandwidth for creative processes and for strategic decision making, because anything that AI does replace in the work that you do frees up time for you to think and be creative. So we're going to dive into that and really understand whether we can start to look at AI not just as an enabler for us as individuals, but as an enabler that can potentially accelerate the social impact that we are all working on, whether we're development, humanitarian, nonprofit, or philanthropies. So we've got a packed house today in terms of our speakers and panelists. So we're going to be starting off with Ed Baldry. Ed joined us in our first webinar, so you may recognize him. He's the Director of Design and Development at Make Sense of It. And what Ed is going to be talking to us about is how innovation, which we associate with technology, is in fact a creative process. So where does innovation, emerging technology like AI, and the importance of our own creative capacity come together to get us to a place where we can use this technology efficiently? So he will be talking to you about that, followed by Ashutosh Chadha. He is Senior Director for UN Affairs and International Organizations at Microsoft. So he's going to be telling us a bit more about the AI for Good Lab, the various partnerships and collaborations Microsoft has. And then we have Ashish Kaneja, who is an innovation catalyst, that word again. And he is representing co-initiatives of Change Foundation, and he's going to be telling us about specific use cases. So action, case studies, and real-world examples of implementation. Thea Mustek has joined us before. She is AI governance specialist at Spirit Legal and head of operations at the Institute for Global Negotiation. And Thea is going to be joining the panel discussion, which will happen in the latter half of this webinar. So without further ado, Ed, tell us more about innovation and creativity.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, let me see that I can share my screen. Always the first hurdle. Ooh, and hopefully everybody can see that. Good, I can see nodding faces. Great. Perfect. So innovation as a creative process. As Sandra said, we often associate innovation quite narrowly as a technology thing, or it's a thing that happens beyond human creativity, whereas actually it's human creativity driving the whole thing forwards. I'm Ed. I set up an agency earlier this year, partly in response to artificial intelligence, or in fact, largely because of artificial intelligence appearing on the scene and making it clear that processes that we had previously used for innovation were not going to work moving forward. So I've had the massive privilege to work with some really amazing organizations. I've worked with Google, I've worked with the UN, I led a design team at Dyson, I ran a startup for a few years. And I support organizations responding to change and navigating complex challenges. And I'm not sure there's a more complex challenge right now than figuring out how to integrate this new technology. But again, augmenting human creativity and human innovation rather than replacing it. And I think the piece that is really important for me when I think about AI is that artificial intelligence, and quite narrowly, specifically large language models, can remove a lot of barriers that would have previously prevented us from being creative. So previously within innovation processes, you might, you would need to form a large multidisciplinary team with quite a lot of expense, quite a lot of time to project manage all of those people. And AI allows us to potentially as individuals or as smaller teams move more quickly beyond some of the barriers that we have when we think about innovation. And I think there are three classes of barriers here which are really, really beneficial to think about when we're thinking about AI and when we're thinking about large language models, when we're thinking about innovation even, sorry. There's the blank page problem. So you know what you want to do, but you need to get started and you don't know where to start. There's the messy problem where whatever it is you're working on just feels completely intractable and you can't pull the threads apart to see, how to get from A to B. And then the final class of barrier is the solution mismatch. So it's the point where you know what the solution looks like for your problem, but you either can't afford it or what you can afford doesn't quite fit the problem that you are trying to solve. And the blank page problem I find really interesting because I'm sure we suffer from this every day, and I think it's the most accessible way to be using AI within our processes to augment ourselves. So this is a screenshot of a project that I'm working on at the moment with a client who we're working on thinking partners for charities. And the idea here is that you don't want AI to come along with a solution. It's not for artificial intelligence to fill in the blank page. You know what it is that you want to create, but you can create better things by being asked challenging questions, by people building, or thinking partners building on your ideas and pushing you forwards. You can use this today in terms of your custom GPTs or projects within Claude will all give you this. But I think is a really interesting way to move beyond one of those barriers within innovation. The messy problem is another, and I think is the biggest problem that most of us suffer from, that intractable mess, the chaos that we are working within. In all of the projects I've been involved with, though, the knowledge, the experience, the information has invariably been within the organization and within the individuals there, right? The diversity of the team, the diversity of the people trying to work on the problem tend to have the answers. It's just that it's in an unstructured, unusable form. And again, another project that we're working on as an agency is taking unstructured workshop information, data, structuring it and turning it into websites. And there are many ways to solve this messy problem. This is just one of them. And the reason for doing this is because websites remain available forever. It means that we don't lose insights from the workshops for the project team that is involved. But as importantly, it means that stakeholders can have a view into the creative work that is going on. So again, it's about AI facilitating and augmenting that process. And then the third of those barriers is the solution mismatch. So earlier this year, I was lucky enough to work with hearing dogs who are based in the UK with assistance dogs for deaf people, and they needed to figure out a new revenue stream. And what we were able to do was to explore 3 different directions they could take in only 2 weeks. And we were able to fully working applications around training services, a service where you could follow the experience of puppies, or you could subscribe to an actual physical box as a pet owner. And not only were we able to build web applications that were fully working, we were able to do simulations for their ops teams, we were able to come up with financial modeling. We were just able to move far, far faster through the innovation process than we ever would have been able to before, so that we understand how the problem and the solution can match nicely together. As we get to this really interesting place where we can, with conversation, move from a rough idea to the outlines of what we want to see, and then finally through to utility. And that might still be rough. It may still take time to get to the final polished artifact. But the fact that we can get from A to B to C so quickly now means that creativity is much closer to many more people and many more teams than it ever was in the past. And we have started using a process that is really very deceptively simple, but it is what we call flux, and it is a make, learn, loop. You make artifacts because the bottleneck of creation has been taken away, and then we take the time to learn. Now, this looks very simple on paper, but for the last 40 years since lean manufacturing started, we have been trying to reach this as designers, innovators, whatever you want to call ourselves, and we've not yet succeeded. And it feels like with AI, we can finally get there because, as I just mentioned, traditionally, the creative part of any project kind of happened before the project started, right? I'm sure that it's a bit of a wobbly drawing. Time on the x-axis, effort on the y-axis. We've all experienced this, where the foresight, strategy, innovation, design, whatever you want to call that creative part of the project, has happened at the very, very beginning. And we've all decided that we're happy enough with the answer, or that's as far as the budget can stretch. And then we just start delivering, right? We put our delivery hat on and start putting down bricks and building the thing. And I think where we get to now is that creativity can just become part of the process. So these lines align with one another, or perhaps they loop between each other, and you go through the creative and the building process together through the whole project. It isn't all perfect, and democratizing ideas, the fact that we can get from idea to outcome so quickly means that if we just rush through like the right white rabbit believing that we're late for everything, we can also democratize consequences, right? It's not just good ideas that will get built, some very bad ideas might get built. And this is why learning is such a critical part to this idea of creation and how we need to work with AI. Learning was always because that delivery was our focus. Once we'd started building, that was all we were looking at. Learning becomes the critical ingredient here. It's really a case of taking the time to reflect, to incubate ideas, to get feedback, to see what's working, what's not working, because it's now cheap and fast to iterate and move forwards with the making. And I think it's very exciting for human creativity right now. Previously always would need, I'm an engineer, a designer. I've always had the privilege to be one of the people that can build things. It's very excited that anybody is going to have that chance, already now, and will increase even more so in the near future. Super exciting times. And with that, I will hand back to Sandra.
Thanks so much, Ed. There's like so much to think about for the audience, but and I think you've done a really great job of identifying what resources actually are we freeing up when we enable. So next up, we have Ashutosh from Microsoft. Ashutosh, tell us a bit more about your work at the AI for Good Lab. It's sort of an application, of these great resources. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. And thanks to the PoliSync team to invite me to speak at this seminar. And I think this, I'll pick up where Ed left. It's a very important area to start discussing about how AI can and should serve as a force multiplier for human creativity, especially in the context of social good and the AI for good stuff that we're doing. We're typically living through a technological renaissance right now. AI is reshaping how we write, compose, design, and imagine. But the real question, like all of us are grappling with, is that will AI become a substitute for human creativity or a scaffold that can help it flourish? And we believe the answer should be the latter. It should be a co-creator and not a competitor. Picking on where Ed talked about, it's really become a powerful creative collaborator across the arts, for example, right? Rather than replacing artists, writers, or musicians, it's actually helping them iterate faster, explore new styles, and expand their creative reach. For example, in our work trend index report of 2023, if I'm not wrong, the artist John Han actually used the Bing image creator to develop the report's visual identity. AI did not replace his vision, as Ed was saying. It actually helped expand it. It enabled him to drive rapid iteration and exploration of abstract ideas, which got included in the report. And like Ed said, writers use generative AI to overcome the blank page syndrome, which helps them create different varieties of conversations that they want to land on paper. Musicians are using AI to mix sounds or even recommend melodies, accelerating the experimentation phase of composing. In Japan, for example, we use generative AI to help people with hearing impairments by converting spoken content into expressive visual narratives. This is not just accessibility, it's a new form of creative inclusion. We have platforms we can help AI simulate debates on complex topics, which can help students sharpen their critical thinking and rhetorical skills. The human spark, our story, emotion, and context will always remain irreplaceable when we use AI wisely. It's basically like, adding a powerful new member to the creative team who works with lightning speed and offers us endless inspiration. But ultimately, it needs direction and coaching from us as the team lead or as the boss, which is why it enhances creativity and it doesn't replace it. But most importantly, I think in this entire story is the fact that AI is actually democratizing creativity. Now, people who have ideas can use tools like Bing Image Creator, DALL-E, etc., to provide an illustration of their ideas. So ultimately, like all of us know, the context comes from us. It doesn't come from AI. AI just helps make it real for us. To come to a larger issue in related to some larger questions that we are trying to solve, which is what we do in AI for Good, with some of our solutions. As an example, in Canada, AI is helping firefighters predict and manage wildfires. In India, it's helping villagers access government services more efficiently. These are not technical solutions. These are creative responses to human needs. So when we talk about AI enabling creativity, it's not just in the arts field, it's also in really being able to solve real world problems. And to that point, there is a solution that AI for Good Lab created called Sparrow. It's a solar powered AI driven system that helps monitor biodiversity in remote areas like the Amazon. It uses edge computing and satellite connectivity to deliver real time insights to converse, conversionists, which means it turns data into a creative force for environmental protection. Now, imagine how this is a creative solution to the fact that for previously, conversionists had to visit, or scientists had to visit the Amazon and these remote areas to track animals, track biodiversity, come back and analyze this. Now, this can happen in real time. So it's acting like a multiplication factor. There's another product that we've created called Haste, which is based, if I use the full form, it's humanitarian AI for situational threat evaluation. It's basically designed to support early warning systems for peace and security. The benefit of this is that you can actually have these Haste programs provide early warning inputs to disaster reliefs. Another fascinating example is where we use AI for accelerating scientific discovery of sustainable materials. So innovation in material science for better batteries, renewable energy, carbon capture has always been slow, but AI can now actually help accelerate that. Again, AI is not thinking about this. AI is helping accelerate this. It helps us invent things faster, from climate resilient crops to better carbon capture techniques. And we see that the AI impact in these areas like climate modeling and resource management can actually then provide a lot of inputs for park rangers, policymakers, disaster relief executives to enhance their ability to respond to situational threats. All these initiatives reinforce the message that we get the best results really when humans and AI work together, doing best at what they can do. But finally, what is important to understand is creativity without conscious can be dangerous. If AI is misused, it could narrow creative choices, reinforce stereotypes, or even replace human judgment. And that is what we all need to protect ourselves for. To ensure that AI enhances creativity, we must establish what you would call guardrails, ensuring a human in the loop, ensuring transparency and explainability. Creators must understand how AI tools work to use them responsibly. AI must be trained on diverse data sets to reflect the richness of human experience. And finally, it must be sustainable design. We must ensure that as we use and create AI solutions, they must be energy efficient and ethically deployed. Let's be clear, AI is not really the artist, it's the brush. It's not the composer, it's the instrument. It's that spark of creativity which remains human, which makes AI flourish. And as leaders in diplomacy, technology, civil society, we together need to define the rules of engagement and ensure that AI is a force for creative empowerment, not creative erosion.
Wow. Amazing. I was getting sort of like goosebumps, Ashutosh. That was brilliant. But, touched on all the points that Ed raised, and a little more on like the practical work of the AI for Good Lab. So thank you for that. Next, we have Ashish. Ashish Kaneja is going to give us the practical examples, a few case studies. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Can you hear me and can you see my screen? Thank you. And I think this is just the right segue into after Ashutosh talking about it and after us talking about creativity, for us to take some live cases of actual implementations where AI has been used and with synergy of humans as well. But before I do that, I did not want to miss the opportunity of giving everyone a very quick introduction to initiatives of change, because we've been one of the sponsors of this 6 seminar series. So we are a global nonprofit movement, and we bring together people from very diverse backgrounds to build trust and foster positive change in society. So Initiatives of Change holds a special consultative status with the United Nations and a participatory status at the Council of Europe. You founded back in 1946, and we are rooted in the belief that personal change is the foundation for societal transformation. And the foundation's mission is to inspire, equip, and connect individuals, groups, and organizations to lead with integrity, live sustainably, and contribute to human security. One of the examples of the activities that we do is called the Co-Democracy Forum, which is actually being held next month at the Co-Palace, which is based out of Switzerland. And at this conference, we'll be exploring the role of inner development in fostering sustainable change and the core values that are needed to revitalize democracy in Europe and the world. So that's as far as Initiatives of Change is concerned. What I'd like to do now is to talk about two very specific implementations and talk about AI and human creativity, and to understand some of the possibilities that AI actually offers in actually transforming an NGO's impact through what I would call collaborative intelligence. So I want to talk about the power of partnerships. In these two transformative cases that I'm going to talk about, the NGOs have actually amplified their human-centered mission through strategic AI partnerships, and they've demonstrated that the most powerful solutions emerge when artificial intelligence enhances rather than replaces human creativity, empathy, and insight, something the previous speakers have talked about as well. So the first case, and some of you might be familiar with this organization called Mercy Corps. So Mercy Corps, if for those who don't know, is a global humanitarian organization that has been operating in a lot of the crisis-affected regions and since 1979. And very specifically, Mercy Corps faced a very critical challenge in 2023 in the earthquake response that they were that they were involved with in Turkey and Syria. And their field teams were drowning in information. Thousands of social media posts and satellite images and local reports and community feedback was streaming in on an ongoing basis and constantly. A traditional analysis method would have meant that these critical needs would have gone unaddressed for days, while teams would manually have to process this data deluge. And there were a whole bunch of immediate actions that needed to be taken, including conducting rapid needs assessments to determine urgent requirements, distributing emergency kits of all kinds, providing essential support for food, water, rehabilitating shelters, offering cash to households, etc. So there were a whole bunch of immediate actions that needed to be taken. Let's now try and understand what the AI human solution was that was put to good use by Mercy Corps. So they partnered with AI systems to create what they called a collaborative situational awareness system. So let's try and understand the role of AI and human intelligence in this collaborative situational awareness system. So the large language models, or LLMs as we call them now, were used to process multilingual social media streams, to look at satellite imagery and do an analysis on them, to look at identified damaged infrastructure, and to do natural language processing through the extractable, actionable insights from thousands of community posts, and do that simultaneously. And this vast piece of information was then used by the field coordinators for irreplaceable content. For example, like understanding what the cultural nuances were, identifying which communities were being overlooked, and recognizing that when AI essentially flagged something called urgent needs, it actually reflected normal local conditions versus any genuine emergency. So it was essentially a kind of creative synthesis. And this breakthrough came when Mercy Corps, the team realized that they could use AI not as a decision maker, but as an intelligence amplifier. The AI systems created real-time flashboards, highlighting complex patterns that humans generally tend to miss. And the benefits of use of this AI were possible because of three specific reasons. Firstly, the AI systems could do the data filtering and all the needs assessment. Secondly, they could do the resource allocation and the infrastructure assessment. And thirdly, Mercy Corps participated in the broader ecosystem of open source disaster relief platforms that used AI to match volunteers with those in need, organize donations, and share real-time information.
Sorry,
So,
Ashish, just quickly, we're not seeing the slides change in case you want to be moving to different slides.
my,
Go ahead.
yeah, thank you. So in conclusion, the Mercy Corps' use of AI during the Turkey-Syria earthquake centered on predictive analytics for anticipatory use, rapid needs assessment through data filtering, and efficient resource allocation via satellite image analysis, and improved coordination using AI-enhanced open source platforms. And these innovations allowed for a very fast, targeted, and more humanitarian relief. I'd like to move on to the second case now, which is World Wildlife Fund, an organization most of us are very familiar with. In this case, and this is a very different use case, in this case, the challenge was quite different. It was on how to make conservation personally relevant to individuals. So for the World Wildlife Fund, this was more of a storytelling crisis. This is in fact a challenge which is faced by most NGOs who are trying to tell their story about their projects to different demographics. And the narrative needs to be aligned. In this case, the World Wildlife Fund, there was a lot of conservation data that was kind of overwhelming. There was a lot of information about deforestation rates, species decline statistics, climatic projections. But these numbers were not translating into any emotional connection or enabling any behavioral change. They had traditional campaigns, and these were reaching the already converted. And the challenge was that how could they expand their impact and reach a newer audience? So to tackle this challenge, WWF developed what they called an empathy scale storytelling, essentially combining AI's processing power with human emotional intelligence as an endeavor to create a set of personalized conservation narratives. The AI's contribution was the use of advanced language models to analyze millions of successful conservation stories across cultures, identifying narrative patterns that resonated with different demographic groups, and using the AI system to generate thousands of story variations, testing different emotional appeals, cultural references, and call to action frames. Superimposed with this was human creativity, using conservation storytellers who brought irreplaceable elements like understanding the deeper emotional connections between humans and nature and recognizing which stories felt authentic versus manipulative, and ensuring that local community voices remained central to conservation narratives. And honestly, the results were quite a creative breakthrough. The magic happened when the World Wildlife Fund storytellers began using AI as a narrative exploration partner. AI would generate story frameworks, but humans would infuse them with authentic local voices, personal experiences, and emotional truth. So, for example, when creating content about orangutan conservation, AI identified that stories emphasizing family bonds resonated across cultures. Human storytellers then collaborated with local communities to capture genuine stories on orangutan mothers and babies, while AI helped optimize how these stories were presented to a different global audience, always emphasizing aspects for parents versus young professionals versus retirees. So, the deeper principle that we can see across both these cases is that we need to understand and appreciate that these cases actually reveal a fundamental truth about effective AI human collaboration. AI excels at pattern recognition, at data processing and optimization, essentially amplifying humans' capacity to see and analyze. Humans excel at meaning making, at ethical judgment, and emotional connections, ensuring that increased capacity serves genuine human flourishing. And the synergy emerges when AI handles what it's best at, which, as I said, is processing vast amounts of information, while humans focus on what we do uniquely well, which is understanding context, making nuanced judgments, and ensuring that technology serves human dignity and community empowerment. So, in closing, I'd like to say that these aren't just stories about AI replacing human creativity. They are essentially proof that when artificial intelligence amplifies human insight and empathy and wisdom, that we can address humanitarian challenges at unprecedented scale while maintaining the human-centered values that make this work meaningful. I hope these two cases give you a good understanding of the kind of use and the synergies that we can create between artificial intelligence and human creativity. Back to you, Sandra.
Thanks so much, Ashish. So now we know the process, creativity and innovation. We understand the practical applications, from Ashish, but then also from Ashutosh, your work at the AI for Good Lab. But it's great to imagine like all these amazing ways that AI can augment our creative, intellectual or professional capacities, but it's always easier to relate to an anecdote, like a true story about a real person that's like right in front of us and their use of AI. So why don't we start with that? I'd like each of you to share a personal anecdote that sort of applies these principles, where you've used AI in your own life to do something that otherwise would have taken you longer, that you wouldn't have been able to do, wouldn't have been able to afford to do, or, whatever the case may be. Can you give us examples of AI augmenting your own capacities? And Taya, why don't we start with you because we haven't heard from you yet. So why don't you dive in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you all for the really interesting presentations. I definitely agree with the speakers. Generative AI and the way that we are trying to think about it is empowerment, and the way that I use it to tell an anecdote of a person that I happen to know best. Still learning how she works in various circumstances, but when it comes to me, I use it for things that I'm on a very low level at, mind you, not a complete idiot, just on a very low level. So to help me out, help me improve, help me reconsider. For instance, I have very basic coding skills, right? So what I would do is write a code that looks like a mess and give it to ChatGPT or whichever one people prefer to use, and kind of help me flag the inconsistencies, help me flag things that could be better, that could be written differently, etc. And so in that way, you kind of have an actual co-pilot, not just the Microsoft one, but an actual co-pilot that kind of helps you steer in real time, as opposed to having actually a real person that you would then have to send this to, and then they explain to you and back and forth. So you kind of have an instant feedback mechanism. And second, where I use it is for things that I'm on a very high level at, to kind of sharpen it up, make things faster. As to kind of tie into what Ed was saying, to avoid this blank page problem, to give me a structure. And then if that's not the structure that I wanted, I will know, because I know what I'm doing. I just want it done faster, right? So I don't want to be starting from a blank slate every single time, but I also want to maybe challenge how I've done things previously. So I also don't want to use the template that I already used 100 different times. So kind of to shake things up a bit by having, again, a co-pilot that is there for you 24/7.
Yeah, the example that Ashutosh gave us of thinking of AI as a team member, I thought was especially useful, but a team member that you have to manage, of course. Um, Ed, how about you? You talked to us a lot about sort of like creativity and innovation, but I'm curious to know, like, how has AI augmented your own capacities?
It's sometimes I have been trying to quantify how much has it augmented your capacity since I've started using generative AI. I think I use it for everything now, in terms of from building on what Tia said about using it in spaces where I already have high expertise. I use it a lot to try and get different points of views, different perspectives, thoughts on what it is that I've put down. Sometimes I'll like put the fuzzy first draft that's come out of my head into thing and be like, where does this potentially move us? How can we go from there? But I think one of the pieces that I have found really beneficial is helping me more easily communicate ideas, quick prototypes, quick ideas, and just I know that it's a simple Python script or a JavaScript thing, and I would know how to write it, but it would probably take me a couple of hours to write it. But I know, because it's so low level, that I can literally just go and ask it, and it will output the thing. It's a complete throwaway, but it helps me with the team to be communicating and talking. Yesterday we did it for some token pricing, right? Like we couldn't figure out how we were caching things. It was immediate. The other way I use it is just in general life. It is really good for problem solving. We have a dehumidifier at home because here in the summer in Italy it gets humid and it's broken. And this morning I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea how I'm going to make this work. But ChatGPT knew how to make it work. Like I was able to send it the photos of the, thing that had been pulled apart. So the piece for me that's been really interesting around creativity is how many different directions you can push it, pull it, prod it. And I think one of the things that is interesting is just, it may feel dumb to ask the machine a question or go with a fuzzy sort of idea, but actually it's quite interesting what it can build on from there.
Yeah, I love like the really sort of everyday life banal examples, like with the dehumidifier, because I feel like that's anybody, it could be anybody. Ashutosh, the other day you had sort of a similar example, which you don't have to use now, but curious to know, what do you have to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, I will repeat that example and another one along with it. So we have a pavement outside our house, which I suddenly, one day I spotted that there are mounds of sand at the intersection of the stones, the pavement stones, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. and there were little ants around it. So I started using Copilot and ChatGPT, both of them I actually used them. And I asked, what is this being caused by? And it gave me an answer that there is something called payment ants, which I never knew existed before, as you also thought, Sandra. And then it asked me to take a picture of it, and I took a picture of it, and it told me then what I need to do, that these are the pavement items of this type, and these are the type of things that you need to do to address it. And these are the type of chemicals or organic mixtures that you can use and address it, and then you can sort of plug the gaps with some sort of cement, right? And now, because I stay in Geneva, I also don't speak the local language, French, that well. So I actually went into it and said, can you tell me stores over here where this equipment and stuff is available? And what is it called in the local language or French language? It actually gave me the stores, it gave me the prices, it gave me what it was. And now, of course, now I can actually either go out, buy it myself and do it, because I asked it, how can I do it? And it explained that to me also. A similar thing, which is related to the external part of my house, is, we have a garden, and I was trying to figure out, it's a large garden. I was trying to figure out, how do I get this place watered? And it explained to me how to figure out a micro drip irrigation system. And I don't have green fingers. I've never done gardening in my life. And I have set up a timing facility, which when I'm not at home, actually give addresses micro irrigation for all the plant beds that we have at home. So that's a personal thing. And then on a professional view, I mean, my role is tech policy, right? And as you would have known, in the last 2 years, there has been so much of policy on AI governance, ethics, which has happened. What I do is I've created an agent in my system, which every day in the morning scans the entire internet and gives me updates on what's happening in various parts of the world in creative tables and also visual representations as far as AI governance and ethics are concerned, whether that's happening in the G20, G7, OECD, in ASEAN, or in Latin America, or in Africa, or in the UN system. So at one shot, I can figure out what's happening and I can go deeper into it. But at the end of the day, again, the thought that I want to get this information comes from me. It doesn't come from the agent that I'm using. It tells me what I can do or what I need to know, but it tells me what I'm asking it, right? And tomorrow I can say, instead of AI, now you should talk to me about what's happening in the world of pharmacy. And I'm not a pharmacy expert by far. But suddenly you're democratizing subject matter expertise for people.
Yeah, fascinating. Ashish, a quick example from you, and then we've got actually a really important question from the audience that we can dive into. Go ahead, just give us an example from your life.
Sure. So a quick one for me has been actually re-experiencing any creative ideas that I have and exploring them very quickly. So on my recent trip to Geneva, I actually started thinking about the rearming of Europe, given the fact that there's a lot going on politically, geopolitically. I wanted to actually write an article about how did Europe rearm during the First World War, during the Second World War, and the rearming of Europe that's happening currently? And and so I knew pretty clearly what I wanted to write about, what the article was going to look like. But I wanted the amount of research that it warranted would have, in a normal course, been overwhelming. But I started exploring all the LLMs. Actually, that is one great way of exploring, trying to go through each LLM and trying to see which one is good at what. So I actually framed, the article that I wanted to write, and started exploring on how rearmament happened, the reasons rearmament happened during the First World War, then the Second World War, and what were the pacifist movements, and how did the pacifist movements respond to that whole situation. And then I took the article and research and pulled it into another LLM And that way, like was suggested by Ashutosh, you can actually start thinking you are an expert in a new field. So I did end up spending 2 or 3 nights understanding this whole rearmament in Europe. And today I think I can hold my own in any conversation on the rearmament of Europe. So it really makes you come up to speed with a lot of stuff and and have a partner who is, a subject matter expert. All it takes is your creativity and your exploration and your intention to understand the world better.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, anything from just providing you with the prompt that you need to get the juices flowing, all the way to starting to think deeply about things that you otherwise would not even try to think deeply about or think about solutions for because you didn't have access, to the subject matter expertise to enable that thought process. So we've got a question from the audience. And for everybody in the audience, usually what we do is we continue this panel discussion for 15 minutes after the session. But because this is such a relevant and sort of urgent question, I'd like to maybe start with you responding to it, Ashutosh, and others can jump in as needed. So the question from the audience is, let's address the elephant in the room. How do we balance the massive energy consumption that AI depends on with the devastating environmental consequences of massive energy consumption? So i.e. the need to produce more energy to run these systems at a time when we're learning, unfortunately, that there have been really devastating environmental consequences related to the way that we produce that energy. So Ashutosh, why don't you jump in first?
Yeah, I also took a swag at actually answering it in writing over there and providing a link. So, I mean, one should not run away and sort of deflect the fact that using AI means you're using the leveraging data centers, and leveraging data centers and means you need more data centers, you need more energy, you need more water consumption. So there is an increase in use over that. Right. So that's definitely a fact of life. But when we look at the IEA, International Energy Association's report, which has just come out early this year, it projects that data centers are actually projected to be approximately 3% of the global electricity demand by 2030 as a base case. So in the real realm of things, it is not actually that big, right? But and they will remain to be a driver of accelerated AI electricity demand. But at the same time, usage of AI can actually create net reduction in global emissions. One, by creating better grids, ensuring that you have a better management of the electricity grid system, managing where electricity is being produced and how it's being transmitted, identifying fault failures, identifying leakages, as well as as I mentioned in my chat, AI can help in advancing material sciences extremely fast. So creating better materials which can help create much more environmental friendly construction materials, steel, cement, etc., which does not contribute to global warming as much as what the stuff that we have today. So all of this combined, AI can actually help reduce emissions, contribute to, and the projection by the IEA is that you can actually, by effective use of AI, there is a 3x chance of increasing your supplier chain reliability and reducing your scope 3 emissions. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. Having said that, AI has the potential. We need to make sure we put it to work, right? So we not ignore the fact that there will be an electricity surge because of that, but we also should not ignore the fact that that AI will not contribute that much to the AI electricity requirement, but it can also actually contribute to global to emission control of emissions.
Yeah, cleaner energy.
Yeah.
Better energy efficiency, definite. That's sort of where my brain went, you know, when I read that question. One more priority question from the audience. Just quickly before because we're at the top of the hour, I wanted to remind the audience again that we have our AI resources page. Please go to it. Provide us with any feedback that you'd like, you know, about these webinars, but please do go here. All of the presentations from the speakers today will also be on that resources page. But for everybody who has a few extra minutes, we have an audience member who has asked us a really critical question. And this is about, you know, the loss of employment, not driven by AI. You know, given the loss of jobs in the charity sector, right? We've seen some really drastic changes recently. How do we think about AI as a tool that can help upskill people globally to help them to sort of find new jobs? And what kinds of jobs could continue to get created within the development and humanitarian sector with AI? Because in a way, what we've realized is that we can't afford to pay for everyone as resources are diminishing, you know, in this area of work. So to what extent can AI play a role in maintaining higher levels of capacity, you know, and performance in this area of work? Maybe I'll start the question with you, Ed, just because you work so closely with organizations in terms of like creating the solutions to solve problems. Go ahead.
It's a difficult question. It's a very big question. Thank you for going to me first. So I think one of the pieces to say is I started my career in international development for a London-based organization. And I think one of the things that international development has that creates value basically anywhere I've worked since is the ability to work in volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous scenarios, right? That's basically what you're doing all day, every day, and that is useful everywhere. And I think it is underestimated just how valuable that skill is. And it is something that AI is not good at, right? This is one of the reasons why humans need to remain in the loop, because those unpredictable, ambiguous spaces are unstructured and hard. How you move from there to, you know, employment, I'm not 100% sure. I think where AI is really advantageous is helping, you know, it's the conversations we've been having up till now, looking at different perspectives and looking at different ways of thinking and seeing how you can use your skills and experiences elsewhere. And I think as AI makes certain things cheaper, it's going to create other externalities. And I think those pieces are still going to, you know, it's the learning part of the flux model that we're working with at my agency. Learning, reflection, working, communicating on a human level is going to become bigger in the coming years, and there will be more of us working in that space than perhaps the, you know, typing keyboards to write code directly.
Exactly. Busy work. You know, I feel like the replacement of busy work with AI frees us
With
up.
actual value. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
frees us up to work to our strengths too, right? Like we're quickly adapted in a way that machines basically are not. But Taya, you might have some really interesting insights on this. You've done a lot of upskilling work with various organizations, and you also work a lot on the risks, you know, around AI. What's your take on this, on responding to this question? What do you think?
Well, uh, I'm gonna go the other way around. Um, it's a really important question, I agree, and it's really timely as well, especially because I discussed it yesterday with my mom. Namely, we were discussing automated cash registers at stores and whether that's an improvement or not really. So, you know, I come from Croatia. Here, they're still not a big thing. If you go to Switzerland, you barely see a cash register with a person actually selling you things. Is that an improvement or not? It depends on the person. The same applies for buying tickets for anything online versus actually going to a counter and talking to a person. Is that an improvement or not? And it surely replaced some jobs. It didn't replace all of them. Will it replace all of them? I unfortunately don't have, a big ball to predict the future with. I might get one at some point, but not there yet. But what I would like to emphasize here is that without experimentation, without play, there can be no progress, right? So we can't just, ban the things because we want to save jobs, and we also can't just, run and do things because we want to be AI driven or whatever. But without a certain degree of, trial and error, we can never find that balance that we have found with many technologies that have been revolutionary in the past, and we were allowed to play with them, and now we know how to use them. And the same has to happen with AI, and the same has to happen with generative AI. And then at some point, hopefully, we can find this balance. How I see my work in upskilling is helping people find grounding in all of this, especially because most of the people that never dealt with these types of technologies, they see the law, they see fines, they hear the word risks, and then they rather don't do anything. And to quote one CEO, I think it was the Netflix CEO, there was an article a while back, and he said, AI is not going to replace your job. It's going to be the person that knows how to use it. And this is precisely the thing, right? We need to experiment with it. We need to ground people in it, and then we can actually progress instead of, fear this replacement, which is to an extent fully justified, but to an extent also unjustified, because these things take time and they develop, and you rediscover yourself and you rediscover your place in the world, and that will happen with AI as well.
Yeah, and there are plenty of professions that are being created, because of this need for AI. I always think that this human intermediary who's really needed in order to introduce others to new technology that for them may be scary, may be intimidating, is still critical, because at the end of the day, comfort is not going to come from the AI, although some may disagree. But that sort of comfort and nurturing, of adopting new tools, I think it's also something that we're quite good at, and there's increasing employment in that space. Ashutosh, we sort of share the same some of the same experiences. I'm sure I'm nowhere near you, working with tech startups from emerging markets. So really recently we're in this tech renaissance, whether it's AI, or like decentralized systems like blockchains. And I've always found it super fascinating how, depending on the context and the culture and the situation somebody's in. This is why local tech innovation is so interesting and important. Everybody envisages what tech can do for them in a different way, and therefore create, sort of like technology tools that look different according to who creates it. And when we think about this risk that Primo mentioned, that if we're not careful, we're speeding towards a future of have and have nots. And the have and have not is access to emerging technology. So my question to you is, for all of these local tech innovators around the world, maybe not necessarily the usual suspects, right? Coming from developing contexts and fragile contexts in some cases, historically, they've had a lot of issues accessing the right skills and resources they need to actually create tech products. How do you see AI playing a role in enabling the growth of those local tech ecosystems?
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting question because, and I'll use an example, right? And we call this AI diffusion, right? It's been 250 years since electricity was introduced in the world, and possibly the first building in New York was completely electrified, right? But 250 years hence, we still have 1/3 of the world's population without access to electricity. And if you look at the trajectory of electrification, you will see that places which got electrified earlier, their growth, their economic, social economic growth and equity has also risen considerably, right? So we cannot and we should not do that for AI, right? And that begs to come to the point that what are those building blocks for the local tech innovators to actually use, right? And it comes down to actually fundamentally 2 or 3 areas. Pure and play electricity. You need to have electricity. That is the most important. Plumbing in the place. You need to have access to compute power. You need to have the relevant skills, and you need to have the relevant data sets to be able to work on, right? Which is why it's an extremely important thing that as we look at these local contexts in developing countries, we start considering how do we ensure that everybody gets skilled, not just on how to use AI, but also how to leverage AI to create larger solutions. And as I think so, Ed was talking about, right? And Annabelle was also talking about it. All of us were talking about it. Is you can use AI now to actually fast track building solutions and building apps, etc., on your own, right? So you really don't need great technical knowledge from that perspective, but you need context, you need local context, and you need the power to have access to compute. So how can we make sure we have the relevant data centers? And you don't need to have a data center in every country, because it then begs back to the same point, which is, are we adding to the environmental degradation? You can have regional data centers, which provide compute access, which provide AI solution access to people. You can have regional skills building programs, capacity building programs, right? So that becomes the entire ecosystem that you need to create.
Yeah.
Invest in innovation, invest in skills, invest in making sure people get the right access at the right time, right? And of course, have the most important plumbing in place, which is electricity.
Oh, yeah, everybody needs it. Ashish, you also have worked so much with like local tech innovators and startups. And you've also mentioned like democratizing capacity and education as something that AI could offer. Do you think this is a game changer, for what otherwise historically have been kind of the small guys in the tech game?
It's honestly a game changer. I think we're all sitting here discussing it because we all realize the impact it's going to have in the next, in the next 1-2 years. I actually experienced this just a couple of days ago. One of the schools, which is a community school here in Bangalore. I'm in Bangalore right now. And there's a bunch of us who've been actually working with this school because it is kids from low income families who are essentially, and so we run that school for these low income family groups. So we had a request just about a month ago, actually, where these kids have been working on creating robo simulating products. So these children are in the 9th, 10th grade, and they've been actually working on creating robotic-based, things which have some application. So these kids were introduced to various aspects of AI in their 8th and 9th grade. They are low-income family. They come from low-income families, and now they were being flown to New Delhi, where they were having a congregation of all these kids coming together. So I'm seeing it actually happen in India right now, where kids from community schools are able to take on, understand, because these skills are very easy, and language is not a barrier anymore for a lot of these kids, because a lot of this information is available in the language of their choice. So it is really, you can see the democratization on the ground. And if governments are going to be enabling these things, it moves very quickly, and these skills get imbibed very fast at community school levels. So it is very enriching to watch this actually happen on the ground.
Yeah, the role of youth, especially in accelerating adoption, I really find it so fascinating. And Ashutosh, you touched on something I was hoping you would, that I think is super relevant to our audience. Ashish, you also reinforced it, how important it is for us to remember that when we're doing international development work, when we're doing humanitarian interventions, in many countries around the world, it is important to remember that we are also responsible for enabling access to electricity, to connectivity in order to avoid deepening this digital divide. And the problem is not, I've spoken to some organizations that are like, no, 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 that's not our core work, or look, we're not going to spend resources on digital literacy because I'm not sure how many of these people really want to have a smartphone, but the problem is not on the adoption side, right? We have perfectly capable communities and populations that, in fact, will probably diversify the array of AI-enabled products available on the market and available locally if we remember that there's an infrastructure foundation that needs to be in place first, And to the point from the audience around like jobs in the charity sector, I also think that increasingly it's going to have to become part of the skill set, to understand how to enable digital access and inclusion as a precursor for making sure that the communities you work with also have access to the same tools you're using, to augment your own capacities. But we're past 15 minutes. It's been such a deep conversation. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Thank you so much to our audience as well for joining us throughout the webinar series. Again, this recording will be available online, as will each and every one of the presentations. So thanks, everybody. This is the last PolySync AI for Good webinar. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day or night.
Thank you.
Bye.